For people coming from most other parts of the world, Thailand is quite exotic, especially for photographers. Here there is so much visual stimulation coming at you from every aspect, from every angle and every corner that you look at. It can be so challenging to take it all in and begin to understand even a small amount of it. And not only that, but Thai culture is so rich and so deep in tradition, it can be difficult to know what to do or what to say in different situations. And this can be quite daunting, particularly if, like me, you're from a country that is quite young and doesn't have the history and the heritage of culture and tradition that Thailand has. Because many visitors to Thailand come from cultures that don't have such a richness and such a depth of history, it's difficult to really make head nor tail of the reasons why people sometimes do the things that they do, and it can be quite easy to make mistakes. But one of the key things that I found in Thailand and that I love the most is the people are so gentle and lovely and forgiving of foreigners when we mess up, when we make mistakes, when we are ignorant of the right way of doing things. And so in this series of videos, I'm going to make 3 different videos about things to do and things not to do when you're visiting Thailand. Each of the videos is a little different. One is focusing on general things to do and not to do in Thailand. Another video is on what to do and what not to do to be polite and respectful when you're visiting a temple, as many foreign tourists do. And lastly, but not leastly, because I'm a photographer and I think it's really important to be polite and respectful when you're using your camera in Thailand, I'm making a video specifically about photography etiquette when you're taking pictures in the Kingdom of Thailand. And so in this video about photography etiquette in Thailand, I want to share with you some of the things that I've learned about this subject in my 21 years of living in Thailand. It's not definitive, it's not exhaustive, it's me sharing from my experience to help you have a better photography experience when you're taking pictures in Thailand. And one of the main keys here that is so underlying, so foundational in any of these tips or shared experiences is to be polite and to smile. Because simply, this is what Thai people do. They are very respectful, they will usually smile, and they are so often so helpful and so forgiving when, as foreigners, we mess up, we make a mistake because we don't understand the right way or the most polite way of doing things. One thing I love about Thailand, especially here in the north, it's often quite easy to photograph people. Generally people are pretty relaxed about having their picture taken, and this just opens the way to getting better pictures, because when you photograph someone that's enjoying the situation, that's enjoying the experience, you're going to get more interesting, more connected photographs of people. Often when I'm taking pictures of people, I'm using a fairly short lens. This is my 35mm lens, it's on a full frame camera, so the angle of view is reasonably wide, which means to get good pictures of people, I've got to be reasonably close to them. I'm also at a comfortable distance to have a good conversation with them. Sometimes when you're visiting a country, this might not be possible if you don't know the language, if the person that you're photographing doesn't speak a common language that you know, but it still has an intimacy, and this will also reflect in the photographs. If you're in the habit of putting a long lens on your camera and standing well back and grabbing candid photos, this is fine, but it's going to create a different type of picture. It's not going to be so intimate, and it's not going to feel so connected when other people see your photos. And with a short lens on the camera, it just facilitates that conversation. And in Thailand, this is really important. Rather than just sneaking a few candid pictures of people, I find it much more interesting to have a bit of a conversation, a bit of to and fro, and to capture a series of images. Sometimes though, this will mean that people are posing or doing silly things that they think you might like to see in your photos, I will always take these photos. I'll show them the back of the camera, but then I'll also aim to get a few more pictures of them when they're a bit more relaxed and a bit more natural looking. But the key thing in all of this is to be polite, to be respectful, and to be confident and smile. If you get a sense that somebody is not interested in being photographed, and this is just a matter of watching their face and seeing their expression, seeing their reaction to you showing them your camera, holding it up and gesturing, that's often enough. How they respond to this will give you the answer of whether they want to be photographed or not. So you've got to be really aware, particularly if you don't understand the language that they're speaking, then you must watch the facial expressions and their body language. And if somebody's not interested in being photographed, I will thank them politely and carry on my way and find somebody else that is interested in being photographed. Here I'm generally speaking about street and travel style photography. So most importantly, have a smile on your face and be polite, be respectful, because people will reflect this back to you, and this means you're going to get better photographs. And if you're not sure about it, if you're nervous, if you're fiddling around with your camera and not sure about your settings, that isn't going to look so great when people reflect that back to you. So if you're a little bit anxious, try and get over that. Just take a few deep breaths before you approach someone and smile, and then you're more likely to be able to get better photographs. And the other great thing about using a wide lens like my 35mm is that I can be close enough to turn the camera around once I've got a couple of pictures and show the people what's on my camera monitor. They can see themselves, and oftentimes I'll just quickly turn the camera around again and take a few more photographs as they're responding to the photographs that I've already taken. Another thing that will facilitate this is that if you learn just a few phrases in Thai, so you can ask people, can I take your photograph? I'm not going to teach you that because I'm not Thai. The best way to learn it is to ask the desk person at the hotel or the host where you're staying. If they're a Thai person who speaks some English, just ask them to teach you a few little phrases that will help just to facilitate and to communicate what you want. And also remember to learn how to say thank you. And even if when you do say the phrase and you don't get it quite correct, people will know because you've got your camera in your hand, and they will also appreciate the effort that you've made just to try. And each of these little things will help you to get better photos of people when you visit Thailand. When I teach workshops, I've found people quite often will tell me that they're reluctant to photograph people because they don't want to impose on anybody. So I always encourage people not to think like that. Don't think about that you're imposing. Think about having a nice conversation, having a nice connection with somebody. Show that you're interested in who they are and what they're doing, and this is why you want to photograph them. They're going to feel blessed by that if you do it the right way, if you're humble, if you're polite about it, you show an interest in somebody. This can actually make their day. It can turn a mundane sort of a day into a much more happy experience, especially when there's some nice conversation or a little bit of to and fro and connection with the person that you're taking a picture of. I know it's not always easy to approach strangers or to photograph people that you don't know, but think of your camera as a bridge. I did this a number of years ago. There was one guy at the flower market who I looked at a number of times as I was passing, and he's just such an interesting face, such an interesting looking character, quite different than most of the men that work at the flower market. Most of them are quite effeminate. He's a bit of a biker dude, I think. He's got usually a black t-shirt on and close cropped hair and some good ink on him. And I just always felt a little bit intimidated until one morning he was standing out the front of his shop in the sun, beautiful backlighting, and just leaning on his trolley, watching the world go by. And I thought, oh, I'm going to have to ask him if I can take his picture today. And he was so responsive. He just sort of stood up straight and really looked handsome, and I got some nice pictures of him and had a nice conversation. And later, next time I was down there, I took some prints of these photos, and so it just was the beginning of a really fun friendship. So every time I'm down there now that I see him, we stop for a chat, and it's really just all because I plucked up the courage to ask him one morning if I could take his photograph. And I've had this time and time again when I've stopped to ask people if I can take their picture. It builds a nice connection and it just blesses them in their day and can make quite a difference in what is often a mundane, normal sort of a day. But when somebody stops to ask if they can take your photograph, it can change your day quite a lot. So change your mindset. If you're not sure about photographing people because you think you're imposing, turn it around and think how much you can bless somebody by taking their photograph. Any situation that I'm in that I'm wanting to photograph children, whether it's in Thailand or not, I always make sure that there's a parent or a caregiver, maybe a grandparent close by, whoever's supervising the child, that I have got their permission. And this is another thing that may surprise many people from other cultures, is that many Asians, not just Thai people, but many Asians love it when you pay attention to their children and want to photograph their children. But I always make sure that this is acceptable first, that I have got permission to do this. And sometimes permission can just be a nod and a smile from the person who's looking after the child. But it's always important to make sure that it's okay to take pictures of the kids. Another question I quite often get during my workshops is people ask that, do I need to pay somebody when I take their photograph? I was in the market just recently with a customer and we'd photographed somebody, we'd had a nice bit of interaction, and this lady asked me, oh, do I need to pay them? It's like, no, you don't need to pay somebody just to take their photograph, but sometimes when it's appropriate, I will pay somebody for the time that we've spent taking photos. And this is usually when we've had quite a session of taking pictures and conversation and it's taken some time. Rather than paying somebody directly, if they're selling something, I prefer to buy something from them. So for market vendors or sometimes in hill tribe villages, it's quite easy to make a purchase from somebody rather than just paying them to take their picture. But at times I've had people ask, and if I'm in a very touristic situation where people are set up to pose if they're dressed or if they've got their kids dressed in traditional clothing, then yes, I would expect to pay something, and it is the polite thing, it's the right thing to do in those situations. I've been in other situations up in the mountains and villages where I've come along where I'm obviously taking pictures, and I had this one lady one time up in a Lahu village, I think it was, asking me for habat, and she's showing me 10 fingers. Habat's 5 baht. So I took some photos of her. I gave her significantly more than 5 or 10 baht, and she was more than happy about that. And we had a nice time together. It was a long time ago, so I didn't have much Thai language, but she invited me in and she introduced me to a friend of hers. She called her neighbour over and was indicating that he had some sort of a musical instrument. And so I think I spent the next hour or more taking photos and making video of her friend who was playing music for us, and others were dancing, and it was just such a terrific time. And of course, I left them a donation there to show my thanks and my appreciation for having such a good collection of photographs and some nice video clips. So it's just something I read by situation to situation. When I do pay somebody for taking a photo, I'm always cautious not to overpay, because this can then affect things negatively in some respects as well. So you've got to take into account of their lifestyle and their conditions, but don't be stingy, but also don't overpay. But there is no hard and fast rule about this. There's no really good guideline other than that, is just to pay attention and just go with the flow and go with your feeling. Other than when it's somebody that's obviously set up to earn money by being photographed. And then they will often tell you how much that you need to pay them. When we first started teaching the photography workshops, we had quite a lot of customers asking us if we would take them to locations where they could photograph hill tribe people. There are so many ethnic minorities living in Thailand, and it is fantastic to be able to get up into the villages and to photograph them. But to find people dressing in their traditional clothing and living in a traditional way is quite difficult, because most people wearing jeans and a t-shirt these days, and to get to the villages where they do still, or where some of the people still wear their traditional clothes, usually entails a lot of very arduous travel. It takes ages. So we looked into going along and doing workshops at some of the tourist hill tribe villages, and we ended up spending many years going to one that has been a fabulous experience. My initial reluctance was because these places to me often seem a bit like a human zoo where you're just going in and looking at people from a distance. But I found that doesn't actually have to be the case, because as we went along to this village, we also made connection and built relationship and have formed some lovely friendships with the people that we go and photograph. So very much the same approach that I take when I'm photographing people in the streets in northern Thailand. I have the same approach when I go to one of these tourist villages. And the key is just to really connect with people and really show an interest in them and who they are, and to bond and use your camera as a bridge between you and them. Because at these villages, they're there to be photographed, they're there to share with you about their lifestyle. They like it that you're interested to know more about them and who they are and what their traditions are, what their language is like, what their foods, what their living conditions is like. So rather than standing on the outside and looking in, sit down with them and have conversations. Some of them will speak some English, others of them will speak other languages, but the more you can connect with them, even non-verbally, the better pictures you're going to get of them. And so we've had tons of fabulous experience building relationships with people from a number of different cultures, and just enjoying getting to know them. During the time of COVID, this has changed, unfortunately, and some of the people we haven't seen for many years now, and we miss them terribly. I quite often share these photos and show pictures of these people, and it is always with a bit of sadness because we haven't seen them for so long, but we have built really precious relationships with these people, and sometimes also hearing their stories of why they're living here. And this one lady here that I've photographed many times, one day I had a customer asking her questions. I was having to do my best to translate. My Thai is not fabulous. Her Thai was probably even a bit less than mine, but I don't speak any Kaior language, which is her heart. It's her mother language, it's her mother tongue. So we did our best, but she told us some of her story, and that she was there because life in Myanmar, in the village in Myanmar where they're from, is really tough. It's really hard. She was at this village with her two daughters. One of them was 19, the other one was 21 at the time, and they feel safe there because they know that at no point is the Myanmar army or any other army going to come through their village and wreak havoc, which is what happens from time to time in their village back in Myanmar. And they also have better facilities for things like medical care and so on. This lady told us that she did have 3 other children who passed away. Her oldest child, her firstborn son, died within maybe 3 weeks of being born because they couldn't get into the clinic in time. He'd had a temperature and they had to take days and days to walk to the nearest clinic, and the child died before they arrived. So when you think of it like that, when you take into account of their experience and the difficulties they may have where they live, it's not an unreasonable thing at all for them to be wanting to live in the relative safety and a bit more comfort than they would have been in their home village back in Myanmar. And so by going to visit these villages, it's helping them to earn some income and have a bit better life, and it helps us to be able to make lovely portraits and have a better understanding of their way of life and their lifestyle. So in these situations, particularly when we're with customers, I will buy something, I'll encourage our customers to buy something. Even though we've paid a ticket price to get in the gate, it's still a very big blessing to these people. If you spend even just a little bit of money with them, it helps them immensely. And on a more general note about photography, being polite and respectful not just of people but also of property and the location that you are is really important. In some places they're going to have signs saying no photography, and I think it's important to respect that. For whatever reason, whether you think you should be allowed to take a photo or not, it's not up to you, it's up to the people whose place that you are. And particularly in private property, anytime you're on private property, you've got to play by their rules. But if you're in a public place, generally you can photograph whatever you like. But there are limitations too, particularly around airports and train stations in Thailand and other countries. Anything of any military significance or importance or connection, it's always best to leave your camera in your bag and not take pictures of these things. And even in places like shopping malls, these are private property, so you need to be aware, you need to be careful. Sometimes they may allow you to take photos, and of course these days everybody's taking selfies when they go to the mall, but they might not want you there with big camera equipment, particularly if you're wanting to set up a tripod, something like that. That's off limits. And I know on train platforms and the Bangkok stations, they are quite happy for you to take photos, but try setting up a tripod and you will have somebody coming along to ask you to fold it up and put it away. When you come to the temple to take some photographs, there's a few particular things that you got to be really careful of. First of all, make sure that you're dressed appropriately. This means that you can't be wearing short shorts or a short skirt. If you're wearing shorts or a skirt, it's got to come down to your knees. And the other thing is that you don't wear a tank top. You've got to wear something with sleeves so that your shoulders are covered. This is considered to be polite when visiting temples in Thailand. And something that may be a little less obvious is that when you come to take some photographs and you want to take a selfie with the Buddha, don't turn your back on the Buddha statue. This is considered to be impolite. So even when you're entering a temple building and it's time to leave, take a few steps backwards away from the Buddha before you turn around and turn your back on it. And just remember, if you want to photograph the Buddha, don't turn your back on it to take a selfie. It's okay to take photographs of Buddha statues, but be reverent, be polite, but remember, no selfies with your back turned to the Buddha. And when you are in the temple grounds, there's always plenty to see. There's always so much to photograph, from the broad overall pictures to the little details. But whatever you're photographing, if you're trying to find a better angle, don't climb up on anything. Don't climb up on a wall or a chair or anything like that. This is not polite practice in the Buddhist temple or in the temple grounds. And when you do enter the temple, as you step foot into the temple, first of all, make sure that you've taken your shoes off. It's not polite to wear shoes or flip-flops or any form of footwear in the temple. And make a point of stepping over the threshold and not on the threshold, because this is not considered polite. And once inside, have a look to see if there's any monks. If there are monks there and they're seated, it's important to stay lower than they are. So we'll walk to where you want to take a photo, walk to where you want to have a look, but then remain lower than the monks. So if the monks are seated on chairs, it's polite for you to then sit on the floor. And if you do want to take a photo standing up, maybe wait a while until the monks are finished and then enter the temple again to take your pictures. And when I visit temples, I'm always paying particular attention to the artwork on the walls inside and around the temples, because this is often what makes each temple quite unique, is the style of the art and the design that's been put into the construction of the temples. And this varies from one temple to another and from one region of Thailand to another. And if you're a woman visiting a temple, keep an eye out for any signs that might alert you to areas of the temple, buildings or other designated areas that women are not allowed to enter. There are sometimes in some temples places that it is considered impolite and disrespectful for women to enter these places. Often it's usually an ordination hall or some other special place. So be respectful of this Thai tradition, this Buddhist custom, and refrain from entering these places. One of the most common questions that I get from people who visit and take workshops with me is it okay to photograph monks? And the short answer is yes. And as with photographing anybody, please do so with respect. Always be respectful of the people that you're photographing, in particular when it's a monk. So if you want to photograph a monk, just be observant, be watchful. Some monks won't mind at all, others are going to be shy and introverted. They're not necessarily going to be so keen to have their pictures taken. So just be aware of this. I was taking a workshop a while ago up at Wat Umong, and we were watching a monk sweeping the yard, and it was a lovely picture. The light was great, everything was good. And I kind of thought, okay, he's in a very open space. There's a lot of people around, there's a lot of tourists around. So in these situations, it's generally okay to take a photograph. So I was working with my customer to encourage them to get the settings right. And then as we looked up again, we realized that the monk had stopped sweeping and he was standing there posing with his broom for us to take a photograph. So we obliged. We took some photographs of him, and I took my camera over to show him the back of the camera so I could see the photographs, and thanked him very much. And then he carried on sweeping. We got a nice picture, but it was somewhat posed. So I spent a few minutes off doing something else, and then we came back again. He was still sweeping and not paying attention to us. And so this is when we got the best pictures of him as he was just doing his chores naturally. And at other times I've had really nice interactions with monks where they've actually asked me to take their photograph. Sometimes they've asked if I will be in the photo with them, and they'll have a friend take a photograph, and that's always a lot of fun. And so if you build that kind of a rapport, then enjoy that and make the most of it and get some lovely monk portraits to add to your collection of photos that you're getting when you visit Thailand. Recently I asked a group of 4 young monks if I could photograph them. They were visiting a particular temple that we were at, and they were quite comfortable, quite relaxed about being photographed. And then as we continued, we were able to take some more photos and have some more interaction with them. So it was a really nice time, and I was able to get some quite unique, quite interesting pictures. Because sure, when you come to Thailand, you've got to get at least one photo of a monk, because it's just such an important visual part of being in Thailand. But a key thing with photographing monks is that please don't just take a snapshot. Please aim to get a better photo than a monk walking away from you because you're too shy to photograph them. Have some interaction as you would do with anybody. And sure, some monks are not going to enjoy it so much, but others of them will really enjoy having a conversation and having their pictures taken. So just be aware of that, and if you do get an opportunity where you can connect with monks, a lot of them these days will speak some English, and they'll quite often want to practice this, and it's a really good opportunity. Often in more touristic areas, there'll be a time for a monk chat at many temples. And if you find one of these, you'll probably find a sign somewhere that's telling you maybe at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock there'll be a monk chat. And this is an ideal time to go and connect, have a conversation with a monk, but then also have the opportunity to photograph them. So go for a chat, go and have a conversation. It's often because these young monks want to learn and want to practice their English some more. So do take the time to have a conversation and then ask if you can make some portraits of the monk. And with that little bit of extra relationship that you've had during the monk chat, that you've had this conversation, they will quite often be comfortable to be photographed as well. So it's a really great opportunity to help them learn some English and to be able to get some nice portraits. And another great time to photograph monks is early in the morning as they're going for their alms gathering in the morning. The monks will walk out from their temples with their alms bowls and meet people along the way who will provide them with food and other items to gift to them. They'll collect them in their bowls, and they will usually say a blessing, chant a prayer, and then carry on their way gathering alms every morning. And so this is a great opportunity to really see such a deep part of the Buddhist tradition and the Thai culture in front of you every day. It's always a bit of a gamble to know what the light's going to be like or how many monks you might find, But do a bit of research in whatever city that you want to do this in, and you'll often find that some of these places have been well documented and that there's a lot of photos online already. If you're in Chiang Mai and you're wanting to take photos of the monks in the morning, up around the area of the Chiang Mai Zoo at the base of Doi Satep is about the best place that I know to photograph monks in the mornings. How many monks you'll see on any given day does depend on what time of the year it is a little bit, and how many monks are in the temple at that time. Usually in the area around the zoo there are a lot of monks that come walking down the hill past the zoo entrance and along the road towards where the university entrance is. So if you're in Chiang Mai, that's a great place to be able to photograph monks in the morning. So I hope you found this video interesting and helpful. I hope you've learned some tips and tricks to make your photographic experience in Thailand more fun, more enjoyable, and to get better pictures. Just to remember to be polite, to be respectful wherever you are. Watch what the locals are doing. This is a great way to learn how to do things. It's such a rich and deep culture that is so far removed from so much of Western culture. It can be a little bit challenging sometimes, but with that attitude of respect and with a humility about you, it will take you a long way. And the key thing is to smile. After all, you are in the land of smiles.